Sometimes there are people like that. Without saying a word, they quietly drift away. Gradually, the contact decreases, their expressions change, and one day, that person is completely gone. Why does that happen? Did I do something so wrong? We endlessly blame ourselves. In our hearts, I gave my all with sincerity, and treated you with kindness. So why does it end up feeling so empty? Leaving without a word seems neither right nor polite, and if I had at least heard a reason, it wouldn't feel so unfair. Instead, our hearts are left lingering in the void. However, the Buddha said this: all relationships flow and do not stay. The more you try to hold on to them, the more suffering follows. That person may not have left you, but rather left according to their own karma. And you, who are left behind, will practice letting go through that relationship. Only sadness remains in the place where that person left, and my heart feels empty and painfully crumbles. At that time, we would say things like this: what did I do so wrong? Why did this person give me such a wound? However, the Buddha said that, although all these connections seem to remain, they ultimately do not. Everything that arises does not stay and eventually disappears, so we believe that connections will be eternal. So, unable to let go, I hold on and eventually fall into suffering within that attachment. The Buddha said that attachment is the root of suffering, and only when we let go of that root can our minds find peace. The same goes for expectations. We have expectations for the people we love. We hope they will do better, understand us more, and stay with us longer. But the moment those expectations are shattered, our hearts are engulfed in the pain of disappointment. Expectations are the seeds of suffering, so not having expectations is true freedom. The mind keeps getting shaken. When people leave, I feel shaken with just a word. I can crumble. If things don't go as I wish, I become disheartened and hurt. However, the Buddha taught that while external winds always blow, the center of my heart must not be shaken. All relationships eventually flow away, and expectations lead to disappointment, while a life constantly sways. In the midst of that, protecting my heart is the very beginning of enlightenment. What have I learned from the place where that relationship has departed? There was a disciple. I was a quiet and deep-hearted disciple who had practiced by the Buddha's side for a long time. However, on that day, his eyes were deeply shadowed. He cautiously asked the Buddha, "Master, I don't know why the person I loved so much left my side. I was truly sincere. I prayed for that person, waited, and gave everything, but in the end, they turned their back and left without a word. Why did this relationship end like this?" The Buddha quietly listened to his disciple's words and then spoke with a smiling face. "The seed you planted was sincere, and the feelings you sent were without deceit. It has already become a virtue, but the circumstances do not remain as you wish." The disciple asked again, "Then, Master, what did I do wrong? Why must I feel so empty and be broken 2 years before you left?" The Buddha pointed to the earth with his finger and spoke to him. "When water is poured on this earth, some seeps in, some flows away, and some dries up. The human heart is the same. Not all the heart you give can seep in. You have given your sincerity, but that person was merely destined to flow away. So do not be troubled. The relationships that have left behind the lessons of karma that you need to learn." Hearing those words, the disciple shed tears. "I have finally realized that the breakup I thought was abandonment was actually a door to my own self-reflection and liberation." There are indeed many connections in the world. There are lasting connections, those that come and go briefly, and those that pass painfully. But the Buddha said that all these connections are a form of learning. Some people come, not to hurt you, but to teach you how to let go of your attachments through that pain. Some people come not to leave you, but to show you how to have an unwavering heart. Through their departure, you loved, gave your all, and treated your connections with sincerity. That's enough. It has already been built up as your blessing, and that person's choice has flowed into their karma. In this world, there are connections that are meant to leave, connections that are meant to stay, and connections that come to help you grow. And after passing through all those connections, what remains for you is just one thing: your heart. Those who protect their hearts do not waver. Those who let go of attachment gain peace. Those who can send relationships with understanding rather than anger, and with compassion rather than expectation, are already standing at the door of enlightenment. This means that all relationships, as the Buddha said, are teachings. And you, who are watching this video right now, are already learning within those relationships and slowly awakening from that suffering. In the next story, there was a disciple beside the Buddha, whose heart was shattered by that one word, the shadow of words and attachment. He grew up hearing only cold and harsh words from his father since childhood. "Why can't you do any better than this? Don't do useless things. Do you know how hard it is for me because of you?" Those words became a knife and left a deep wound in his heart. Even after becoming an adult, he couldn't help but be shaken whenever someone said something slightly careless. He asked the Buddha, "Master, I have tried to live more kindly than anyone else. I tried to be good to people and not to get angry. However, when someone speaks coldly to me, my whole body freezes and my heart collapses. Why is this wound so deep?" The Buddha said, "Words are not just sounds floating in the air. They are the sparks that ignite the meanings you cling to. The reason some words become like knives is that there are still unhealed wounds in your heart. We get hurt by words, especially when the words come from someone you love or trusted. That pain does not fade even after years. You shouldn't have said that. How could you do that to me?" The obsession with those words lasts longer than the person. The words have already flowed away, yet we cling to them and constantly stab ourselves. But the Buddha said, the words have disappeared, the person has left, and only your obsession remains, to torment you. The reason it hurt to hear that was because I liked that person. It was because I believed those words. It was because that feeling was sincere. You must now acknowledge that this feeling was not a lie. And you should be able to understand and let go of the ignorance of the person who said that. Words come from that person's karma, and your wounds can lead you to healing. There was a young man who was devastated by a single word he heard from a friend in the next story. "I was always quiet since I was young and had a personality that didn't easily reveal my true feelings." Although he seemed to be doing well on the outside, in reality, he was someone who always struggled and worked hard to gain recognition from others. He had one longtime friend. They had known each other for a long time, and he deeply trusted that friend. One day, he carefully handed a small piece of writing to his friend, filled with his personality and insights he had realized over the past few days, and said, "This is of the feelings I deeply experienced during my practice. How does it look to you? If there are any faults, please let me know." But my friend said this with a smile and indifference. "You always seem to lack something." Although those words were thrown out lightly like a joke, I suddenly felt a sense of collapse in the young man's heart. Am I always a person who is lacking? No matter how hard I try, can I never convey my true feelings? He couldn't say anything and just smiled, but that night, those words kept swirling in his mind. The Buddha said this: "Words are not just passing winds. They take root as karma in the heart of the other." That friend merely spoke his thoughts without any consideration, but those words deeply embedded themselves in a heart that was ready to be hurt. The young man realized that just then, it is often not the words themselves that hurt us, but rather the long-standing loneliness that makes us want to confirm our worth through the recognition of others. We get hurt by trivial words from close and trusted people and carry those words with us for days, months, or even years. However, if your heart has crumbled at those words, it is not because you are weak, but because you had a longing heart that deeply desired it. The Buddha said, "Realize that the words that hurt you were the opposite of what you deeply wished for within." Those words were a mirror reflecting your heart. If you've ever been brought down by a single word, it's proof that you've lived sincerely. Now, you must love your true self even more within the traces left by those words. Why does the expectation of the third chapter lead to disappointment? There were always several disciples diligently practicing by the Buddha's side. Among them, one disciple was particularly prone to being shaken in his relationships with others. He was sensitive to what others said, had high expectations for those he became close to, and would quickly feel disappointed and hurt if they acted even slightly differently. One day, he asked the Buddha, "Master, when I give my heart to someone, I hope that person will meet my expectations. However, most of the time, they do not, and in that moment, my heart crumbles. What I hoped for wasn't that big, and I thought it was something they could naturally do. So, why does that expectation become such a great pain?" The Buddha looked into the eyes of his disciple and spoke. "You are holding up a mirror that reflects the shadow you carry within yourself. What you expect is merely an illusion created in your own heart, and the other cannot be responsible for that shadow." The disciple quietly closes his eyes and asks again, So should I not trust anyone or have any expectations? The Buddha answered quietly. It's not that you shouldn't have expectations, but rather that you shouldn't rely on them. People cannot be perfect, and others are not obligated to live up to the image you have of them. Expectations are like a swing hanging outside your heart. If no one pushes you, you will inevitably sway. So, you must establish a center within yourself and maintain a steady heart, even when the outside world is shaking. We all have something we can do for someone. You must understand my heart at the very least. I hope you wouldn't say something like this. When that expectation is met, we feel joy. However, when unmet, that feeling turns into anger, disappointment, and hurt. In reality, it may not be that the other person has betrayed us, but rather that we have been betrayed by the expectations we created for ourselves. The Buddha said, expectation is like throwing a stone into a calm heart. When what you hope for collapses, your peace will shatter as well. Therefore, we should not refrain from expecting, but rather cultivate a heart that is not shaken by expectations. For example, parents have expectations for their children. I wish it could be like this. If you just study well, listen well, and get married well, but children do not live up to their parents' expectations, then my heart collapses, and I either blame myself for what I did wrong, feel disappointed, or get angry. However, the Buddha said, people do not grow according to your wishes. They are merely the result of the intertwining of your karma and that person's karma. Let go of your expectations and understand that person's true nature. The more we love someone, the more we tend to expect from them. However, true love begins with quietly letting go of those expectations. You must know my heart, even without me saying anything. They should be able to do at least this much. By now, it must have changed. Thoughts like this accumulate and eventually lead to hurt. Expectations distort love, and disappointments destroy that love. Have expectations, but do not rely on those expectations. If you keep your heart centered, your peace will not be shaken, regardless of what others say or do. Next story. Why do I crumble so easily? One day, while examining the roots of expectation, a disciple quietly bowed his head and said to the Buddha, Master, I crumble too easily under the words of others. Even if it seems like someone is just slightly disregarding me, I feel a boiling anger inside, and when a loved one treats me indifferently, I want to give up everything. In fact, I want to be loved by others. I want to be recognized. And I hope you don't hate me. But why does this feeling hurt so much? The Buddha gently patted his disciple's back and spoke. Your expectations stem from the desire for others to complete you. However, your existence is already complete in itself. Everyone wants to be loved, understood, and recognized. Especially if you did not receive enough love in your childhood, or have had many experiences of being compared to others and not meeting expectations. That empty feeling continues to grow under the name of expectation. Even as you become an adult, this person will protect me. This person will understand my heart. This person will never leave. However, the moment that expectation crumbles, the pain feels as if not only that person, but my very existence is collapsing. This is because I have placed the value of my existence within that expectation. The Buddha said, your worth is not something that comes from being recognized by someone. It is something you inherently possess. We often want to confirm that we are good people through someone else's love, through someone's gaze, a single word, or a message. We want to tell ourselves, yes, I am someone who can be loved. If the other person doesn't do that for me, I leave behind a trap that makes me fall into a worthless existence. Now you need to understand, you are not a valuable person only because someone loves you. You are already a precious being just as you are. And to live with a center that remains unshaken, even without expectations. I will offer a small practice. Every time you feel expectations from someone, quietly say this to yourself. That person is not someone who will complete my heart. I am already a person with a complete heart. Just by repeating those words, your heart will gradually be free from expectations. In the 4th chapter, there was a disciple who learned how to find his way. In the calmness of an unwavering heart, he diligently practiced every day. But the affairs of the world continued to shake his mind. When someone spoke unkind words, those words lingered in his heart, and when his child didn't listen, anger would rise. And when a loved one kept their distance, it felt as if his heart was empty. One day, he asked the Buddha, Master, I want to keep my mind steady. I want to attain an unshakable peace, but the world constantly shakes, and I crumble too easily. How can I make this heart as solid as a rock? The Buddha quietly pointed to the edge of the pond and spoke. When a stone is thrown into the water, ripples are created, and those ripples soon disappear. However, even when the wind blows and it rains, the bottom remains unchanged. Your heart should be the same. The surface may tremble, but the depths of your heart must always remain calm. In life, there will inevitably be many times when you are shaken. With just a single word from others, we can quickly crumble due to unexpected betrayal and rejection in love, and we often blame ourselves for being so weak. However, the Buddha taught us that being unshakable does not mean being without shaking, but rather not losing one's center even when shaken. Just as the wind shakes the trees, the world always stirs our hearts, but the enlightened see their center within it. This means that the world does not need to change for me to find peace. Rather, I must find peace for the world to appear different. Let me give you an example. Some people can have their mood ruined and their very existence questioned by just one irritated comment from their spouse in the morning. In this way, we live our lives endlessly shaken by a single stone thrown by others into the lake of our hearts. However, if you cannot avoid that stone, you need to practice accepting the ripple without being shaken to the bottom. That is prayer, practice, and wisdom. The Buddha said this: keep your heart not outside but inside. The words and winds from the outside may not stop, but your center can remain calm. So how can we maintain that center? The answer is surprisingly simple. Focusing on your breath. Noticing this moment. Swallowing words. Praying. This small practice brings our hearts back to center. No matter what others say, whether those words are true or not can be judged by your heart. No matter how people see you, you already know who you are inside. As long as you can maintain that center, you will not crumble. No matter how much the world shakes. When the heart holds its center, nothing that wavers can hurt me anymore. In the next story, at the moment when the heart is shaken, a small practitioner maintains their center. One disciple was meditating with their eyes tightly shut, breathing heavily. The Buddha quietly approached and asked, "What suffering makes your breath so rough?" The disciple replied in a trembling voice, "Master, no matter how much I practice, when people treat me rudely, my heart explodes in that moment. I try not to get angry, but I feel a boiling rage inside. Even if I swallow my words, my heart is in hell. Am I still lacking in my practice?" The Buddha sat quietly by the pond and spoke. When a stone is thrown into the pond, the water ripples for a moment, but soon becomes clear again. So too is the heart. If you truly possess a center, there may be disturbances, but you will return to that center. Life is always a series of collisions. Some people will ignore you, and on some days, even those close to you won't recognize your true feelings. In that moment, the heart wavers, but overcoming that moment is not a grand achievement. Rather, a small breath, a brief moment of silence, a moment of not speaking, a line from a prayer, a small gesture of bringing two hands together. This is true practice. The Buddha said, true practice is not about maintaining tranquility when alone, but about not losing tranquility in the midst of the world. The fifth story. It is time to let go. The disciple quietly asked, "Master, I think I understand my heart now, how to break free from lingering attachments, obsessions, and regrets." Relationships do not linger, and expectations lead to disappointment. One must maintain their center to find peace. However, even knowing all this, I still long for that person, cannot forget the words from that day, and cannot let go of my regrets. The Buddha looked at the disciple's bowed shoulders and spoke. You may have let go of it in your mind, but in your heart, you still hold on. True liberation is to empty even the desire for the past to not return. Our hearts are truly stubborn. Even though I know it's a relationship that has already ended and that I should let go of the person, I still harbor a hope in a corner of my heart that maybe, just maybe. Then suddenly, the person's name comes to mind, the conversation from that day repeats, and I wonder, why did it happen? What if I had been more patient? That person must have known my feelings, yet these emotions linger heavily in my heart. But the Buddha said, what you hold onto is suffering, and letting go is liberation. Everyone wants to cherish their connection with that person. However, there are no ties that last forever, and only what I have learned remains in the place where the tie has left. If you can't let go, pain remains, but only by letting go can gratitude finally remain. Let me share a story from reality. There was a believer. He was betrayed by the person he loved for a long time, and since then, he hasn't been able to settle his heart anywhere for years. Even when he prayed or meditated, he found himself endlessly collapsing in front of that name that suddenly came to mind. However, one day during prayer, this sentence came out of his own mouth. That person must have been in pain like me. That person must have felt lonely like me. In that moment, he finally burst into tears, and for the first time, a feeling of not blaming that person blossomed within him. Since that day, that person's name was no longer associated with pain. It had simply become a scene of life, a lesson, a connection of karma. Now, it is time to let go. You must let go of past relationships, unfulfilled expectations, and regrets that cannot be reversed, because if you don't let go, new relationships and new joys cannot come into your life. You must empty yourself to be filled, let go to find peace, and let things flow to welcome blessings. This is the final teaching of the Buddha. The heart exists to be emptied in order for a new tranquility to settle above it. You are currently walking through that process. Every relationship you have experienced is never in vain. That connection has made you stronger, taught you to have a broader heart, and is leading you down a more peaceful path. So today, quietly say, thank you to all those connections. And now, I will let go. If this video could lighten your heart, even a little, then, that alone makes us connected to each other. Thank you for being with Moonlight Wisdom again today. Even amidst departed connections, unfulfilled expectations, and a wavering heart, you are the one who maintains your center. I hope this video becomes a beacon of peace. If you share the one sentence that resonates with you, or your story in the comments, that line can become a beacon for someone else. Have a peaceful day.